Welcome to our show today. I know that a lot of us are concerned about what happened this spring when we had distance or remote learning. And we are very concerned, right, about what's going to happen in the fall because all of those plans are kind of up in the air. Um, we have a wonderful guest today that is going to help us understand an option that is available to parents by filing an Office of Civil Rights complaint if your school offered your child very few services during that distance learning time when schools were closed. And to prevent that from happening again, right? We want your child to receive the supports and services that they're entitled to. So Marcie Lipsitt is with us today. She is an advocate in Michigan and has years of experience filing Office of Civil Rights complaints. And so she's going to talk to us today about this national campaign that she is hoping that we get behind and that we can make an impact on our kids' education. So welcome, Marcie. I'm glad you're back to our show.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you, I was thinking for some parents that might not have that much background knowledge about Office of Civil Rights complaints, if you could give us a quick kind of synopsis of what that is and, how that can proceed and what some of the resolutions you can get when you file an OCR complaint.
Sure. So the United States Department of Education has a federal office for civil rights, and these are administrative complaints. They are not lawsuits. There's always a lot of confusion about that. I am a non-attorney lay advocate, so if I filed a lawsuit, I would be engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. I don't do that, but I can do anything administrative, which means that I can file federal civil rights complaints, I can write special education state complaints, and I can be the worst nightmare for a school district and their attorneys because of that. So when you file a complaint with the Federal Office for Civil Rights, it can be done two ways. They have an electronic form online, which is what I use. They also have a PDF you can print. I don't find that as user friendly. I know some people use it. I always use the electronic form. I write or I keyboard the allegation, typically on my iPad, on my notes app, and then I cut and paste it into the allegation box of the civil rights form when I'm filing them for families. And in Michigan alone, I probably filed 300 last year. I am a frequent flyer. That's my reputation with the U.S. Department of Ed Office for Civil Rights. But the complaints are under the parent's name. Very often I'm the second contact, and I'm always happy to do that for a family. But I file the complaint with the parent's information. And then what a parent has to do is, once it's filed, print a one-page consent form. And I explain that when I email it to a family. You have to fill in your name, your school district's name, or the college or university. You have to sign and date giving the Office for Civil Rights permission to evaluate your complaint. And then you either have to scan and email it to one of 12 regional offices in the country. Mine is Cleveland. Or you can fax it. I can tell you from experience, if you can scan an email, you are better off. Federal fax machines have been known to fail. And then if you don't keep a copy of your transmission and they say they haven't received it in 14 days, they will close your case. I believe in the power of federal civil rights complaints, even in this dark period where we have what I believe, a wicked witch as the education secretary. I am not a fan of Betsy DeVos. There's no love lost between the two of us. We've gotten to know each other well in 3 years. Actually, longer than that. She's from Michigan. But I still find that I can achieve more for families who need compensatory services. So a child hasn't received resource room help in reading or in writing or in mathematics or organization, hasn't received a speech and language service or occupational therapy, physical therapy, orientation, mobility. And I'm able to get comp ed for these children through these complaints that most state departments of education are not awarding right now. I call the Michigan Department of Ed the Grinch that stole Christmas. So they write these ridiculous final reports on state complaints that are just full of legalese, and they find every reason to not find a violation. And even when they find it, they find every reason to not find a denial of a free, appropriate public education. So I pretty much bypass the Michigan Department of Ed unless I'm trying to get under the skin of a district by filing a state complaint because goals aren't measurable, present level doesn't have clear data, and the Michigan Department of Ed will put a district through the ringer to investigate that kind of complaint. It's just the outcomes that are not wonderful.
I bet. Let me, sorry, I need to bring myself back up here. Yeah, and so we already have some questions coming in, but what I thought would be helpful is if you maybe talk a little bit about the focus of these OCR complaints at this time and how parents can, maybe get some assistance to filing them.
So I have said since the school closure began across the country that if I had the time and some help, I could file 7 million federal civil rights complaints on behalf of virtually every single child in America with an IEP, and even some with 504 plans that have not been remotely implemented in a good faith effort. And over the last month, helping my Michigan families, I've probably filed, I think, somewhere between 8 and 11, I have to count. And some of them have already been sent to resolution, which is a good thing, to mediation. And then this past weekend, I had what I call one of my conversations with myself. I was ticked off at some mothers on Twitter who were just whining and crying and complaining about the state of public education in America. But that's all they were doing, was whining and crying and complaining. And they did not want a dialogue on actions that could be taken to improve public education and special education in America. I write on my Facebook pages all the time. Today I wrote on my personal pages that while I am not immune to the pandemic and I don't want children and teachers in unsafe settings, that I believe children have to be educated in America, that not educating them is not an option. We can go back and look at what's happened during previous school closures in 1918 and in 2009, and when there have been major school strikes, and it has not been good for children. It's not good for their outcomes. I also believe that public education was in crisis before the pandemic and school closure. And my fear, and it's already starting to happen, is that it's easy for the federal government and state governments to focus now on the need for money in schools to reopen them safely. And yes, we need money, but money will not fix outcomes. And I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that the institution of public education, as envisioned by Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965, when he signed the Elementary Secondary Education Act, our big Title I law, has died. And we've never had equality, we've never had equity, we don't have equal educational opportunities. And people need to look in the mirror, think hard about that, because they're going to hopefully get into a voting booth on November 3rd. Are they going to vote for children? Do they believe in the institution of public education? Because if they do, then they will recognize that the way that public ed exists right now, pre-pandemic, was not working. Class sizes are too large. That is not optimal for children. Teacher preparation has been archaic for decades. It needs to be overhauled. I get lots of advocates, parents with children who have learning disabilities, and teachers have no training in research-based methodologies. So this weekend, having this dialogue on Twitter, I finally said to myself, I am going to write on Facebook and offer to file, as a volunteer, federal civil rights complaints for families that reach out with IEPs in districts that did not even show a good faith effort to provide any special education programs or services or supplementary aids. And what I mean by good faith is that there are districts, including in my state of Michigan, that teachers didn't get on the phone. They did not participate in a virtual meeting like Zoom or Google Meets or Microsoft Teams or WebEx. They did nothing. And some children got packets. They got, paper packets. They might have gotten an email that said that a teacher was going to have office hours 15 minutes a week or 30 minutes a week. That is not direct, explicit instruction, and that is not a good faith effort. And for those families, I am happy to file a federal civil rights complaint for families that want to understand the process, recognize it's not necessarily the fastest route, but it is a way to, one, get some comp ed for your child. Two, knowing that school will not look the same when it resumes in August and September, depending on the state you're in. I want these districts on notice that what they did is not going to fly moving forward. And that while I believe in public education, I believe that looking at things like private clinics that are open and safe and offering speech and OT and PT need to be considered by school districts. They need to pay for that. Districts that did not evaluate children during the closure. And I've said from the beginning, IDEA has been the law of the land. It was the law of the land before March 13th. It is the law of the land today on July 9th. And it never left the building. And evaluation timelines are in place. Your districts that tell you otherwise are not being truthful with you. And now that some clinics are open in states across the country, I've had families in Michigan reaching out and saying, we want you to pay for a private evaluation this summer. We don't want to wait until late fall for this evaluation that was going to be done in the spring of 2020. So I took a deep breath and said I was going to have a nationwide OCR complaint campaign during COVID-19. And I will tell you that the one thing I didn't think about was the time it would take to file these. They're not as quick as some other complaints I have filed because I'm reading multiple copies of IEPs over a school year. So I'm going to ask parents for probably more patience than I would have had every single parent only had one IEP. But I am going to do everything I can. If I can find some advocates along the way who will help, I have one in California that's helping a little bit. If I have a couple parents that want to help me when it comes to reaching out to parents that are filling out forms and reaching out, making contact, having them email me copies of IEPs that covered the 2019-20 school year, any evaluation requests, and then bullet points on what was not done that should have been done during the closure. That alone would be helpful. If I don't have that help, I will do what I can as one person.
I know. And I think you said that you've already received like 200 requests. Yeah. So Christy is asking how they can contact you. I have in the description of the post the link for a form for you to fill out, but I can also give you Marcie's Facebook page, and so that would be a great way that you could, you
can message,
question there, or say that you're interested. But yeah, so I think
I have an advocacy Facebook page too. They can fill out a form if they want to.
Okay, and
It's Marcie Lipsitt, Education Advocate. Or okay. Actually, if they even just go to marcielipsitt.com, which is my website, there's a form they can fill out.
Oh, good. Okay, great. And I'll type that up there too. And so let's look at some of the questions. So we have Julie is a teacher from Arizona that is with us, and she says that her concern is general quality and quantity of special ed support at her school. So from a teacher perspective, we know there's teachers that want to do more and kind of get, I don't know, circumvented sometimes by administrators. But so when teachers are concerned, do you want to speak to that also, as far as that would be a possibility for a teacher to file an OCR complaint too, right?
Oh, certainly. Anyone can file a civil rights complaint. You do need the permission of the parent. The parent has to sign the consent or has to give you written consent that you can sign it. But certainly teachers can do that. You know, I feel my mother was a teacher. My mother-in-law was a reading specialist. I have been fighting for public ed since I can walk or talk from what my mom says. And I think teachers have to use their voices because I believe in public education. I believe it is the greatest civil right every child has. I would like America to have globally enviable public education. I don't think that will happen in our lifetime, but I won't stop fighting for it. I think anyone that recognizes that public education is not what it needs to be and hasn't been pre-pandemic recognizes that teachers have needed more training than they've received in their professional development and in their teacher preparation programs. I hear that from teachers in Michigan. You know, I didn't have the training. So I'm always pushing for teacher training. I would say to this teacher that educating your parent, send your parent to Facebook pages that can be helpful. Explain to a parent that they do have the option of considering a civil rights complaint. Civil rights complaints are not filed against people. They are filed against school districts, colleges, universities, libraries, but never against a person. And I frankly think it's an obligation because anyone that really cares about the children needs to fight for what is happening right now and needs to recognize that public education was in crisis pre-COVID. And our federal government, like right now, talks about reopening schools. They don't talk at all about the fact that we probably need $500 billion to really reopen public education because we need to reopen buildings in some school districts for social distancing. We need to build buildings in other districts. We need more teachers. We have a critical shortage of teachers because we have run teachers out of the industry in America. Who wants to teach under these conditions? It's become such a vicious cycle. But yet, I would like to see the American Federation for the Teachers and the National Education Association fighting for changes to teacher preparation to make every single teacher more valuable. I want teachers recognized for what they do. I want them to earn the best living. But the way they are instructed right now in colleges, we are not turning out the teachers that our kids need or are going to benefit from based on the data we have.
Well, there are so many areas where we do need to look at reform. I think, when you look at the disproportionality of, students with color being referred to special education, being, disciplined, restrained, and secluded. I mean, there are so many concerns. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know a lot of parents and teachers are out there doing it. And we appreciate people like you, Marcie, that can help provide some of that leadership. I know Judy is wondering, with the OCR complaints, what kind of relief are you anticipating and going to be asking for?
It depends on the denial of programs and services. It depends how many special education hours are in a child's IEP. So children that are in more segregated special education programs, children that need a more segregated program for an autism spectrum disorder, for deaf and hard of hearing, for children that have all kinds of emotional, behavioral, social challenges and need quieter settings, so they spend more time in special education. And if those children are, like the majority of children, they got maybe 2 30-minute Zoom sessions a week or less. And for those children, there are a lot of hours of missed hours of special education. Children that didn't receive direct speech and OT, it's ridiculous that speech clinicians and occupational therapists didn't offer virtual instruction and trial it to see if a child could respond. Not all children can respond to virtual. And for those children, everybody really needs to put on their thinking caps. How do we educate? Because these children have a right to an education. And I feel like we're back in the 1950s right now. So it's the amount of services. If you have a child that is supposed to receive speech twice a week and got no speech during that closure, then you are looking for them to make up all those sessions. Same thing with occupational therapy or physical therapy. I have a couple of kids that have are both blind and low vision, and orientation mobility that hasn't happened.
Yeah, and so Laura has a good question about comp ed. She says, our district said that they would not consider comp ed until school resumes in person, no earlier than August 17th. What is the timeline for an OCR complaint? What if maybe services were not provided pre-COVID as well as after COVID? Are these treated differently?
So when I file a civil rights complaint, one, you can only go back 180 days with the Federal Office for Civil Rights. They ask you if you want to appeal that timeline. I've never seen them appeal it. I mean, I've never seen them grant that extension. So you can go back 180 days. I'm already finding with some families that I'm helping that there were some services that were not provided pre-school closure, and I am including those in the complaint. I break down my civil rights complaint into allegations. And when the OCR opens it, they don't have to open all the allegations. If I have 20 allegations, they can open one, they can open 6, they can open 15 or 20. So I do try to capture. I've actually had a few families say to me with humor this week, wow, you found way more than we knew was wrong. And that's because that's what I do. But so I am looking at pre-COVID, I'm looking during COVID. I understand the responsibility of districts to consider every child for an IEP for compensatory when school resumes based on regressing due to the closure. That is different than a district that didn't put forth a good faith effort to provide instruction during the school closure. And that's where the fork meets the road for me. That's where I am saying it's a civil rights violation. Your district did not begin to meet the obligation during the school closure. Will you be entitled to comp ed when school resumes? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going to be that easy in a lot of states. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it sounds to get it that way. I think more families will be filing more civil rights complaints.
And so do you see it as mainly compensatory services that would be the remedy that you'd be asking for in the complaints?
I always ask for compensatory in this kind of case. I mean, I file civil rights complaints on every single issue. I've had buildings reconstructed because they're not accessible. I've known from my web accessibility work across the country and bringing websites into compliance, parking lots into compliance, playgrounds into compliance. But when it comes to children that have been denied services and special education programs, that's compensatory education. And what happens is after you file the complaint, you have to watch for your email and phone because an OCR attorney will reach out. They can reach out anywhere from 2 days to 2 months just to talk to you and to either ask you questions because they're evaluating your complaint to see if they're going to open it. They can, instead of fully evaluating it, if they see there's enough evidence, they can offer rapid resolution, which is a process before a complaint is formally opened for investigation. And I tell parents, grab it. Grab any attempt at resolution. Very, very few districts say no to resolution because the Office for Civil Rights can make their lives miserable investigating. And if both say yes to resolution, then the Office for Civil Rights schedules a resolution session that an attorney from the Office for Civil Rights attends. Right now, they're doing them virtually through Zoom. I've done 3 so far this summer. I'm doing 2 next week. And very similar to how they're done when they're done in person. And then you're negotiating the comp ed. In advance, you talk to the attorney about what you're hoping for. And I'm very realistic with families of what you can get. It's a civil rights complaint. It's not a due process complaint. You're not going back 2 years. And you don't need an attorney. You don't have to spend any money on it. But you can get a decent number of compensatory hours out of it.
So Laura has a follow-up question. She says, are compensatory services only one-on-one, or can they be more than one-on-one?
It depends if the compensatory is delivered and agreed upon to be delivered in school or in a clinic with private tutors. If it's in a private setting, it would be one-on-one. If it's in school, there are times, depending on the amount of comp ed, especially cases where there's a lot of comp ed, that it can be helpful for kids to not be alone for lengthy periods of time and to have one or two children with them that are at the same reading level, at the same math level. But if it's more than one child, I do that very carefully with a parent. We document in a resolution that it will be no more than this child and one other, or this child and two others, and that they will be at the same level, whether it's basic reading or reading fluency or reading comprehension, whether it's written expression or, or mathematics, that they're going to be working on the same skills at the same time.
Well, and I think, that is some of the concerns for families as far as, and depending on what the model is going to be in your district, as far as how much in-person time your child's going to have. But to then think about compensatory services in addition to what they're going to be getting, and then how does that all get played out? So, is it going to be Saturday school where students can get additional help? I mean, that could be an option. And like I said, like you said, putting on our thinking caps and looking at, what are some ways that we can do compensatory ed without pulling the child out of general ed more and upsetting that balance that's in their IEP with the least restrictive environment. But I think we need to look at some of the options. Julie,
Let me jump in for a second, Sherman,
yeah.
because comp ed can't be delivered during a school day. It has to be outside of a school day.
Oh, okay.
What will make this unique is that there's every reason to believe that in most states, children will not return to school 5 days a week, brick and mortar. And that will open the door to provide some comp ed during the day when a child would have been in school, because districts will still not be offering the same number of hours. But typically, comp ed is done after school. It is done on Saturdays. It's done during the summer.
Right. Yeah, and I think, there are quite a few districts that have like a week-long fall break. I mean, that could be another opportunity where parents could do it. Or if there's going to be outside providers, then the parents could look at a schedule with the outside provider. So I think there will be a number of options for families to consider. Julie, the teacher in Arizona, had asked, what if it's a Title I charter school?
Well, there's no such thing as Title I means that that the school or the district has a percentage of children that are economically disadvantaged and are free and reduced breakfast, lunch, afternoon milk, but a charter is a public school and must be in compliance, in theory, with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, with Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. They are required to be in compliance with state and federal public education law and rules.
Right. And so let me look here. Casey has a question, so let me see. She says, can OCR address the school refusing, failing to provide one-on-one support for the non-speaking child that requires a communication regulation partner to respond to curriculum?
OCR will address it if it's in the IEP. If it's something that the IEP team didn't agree to and it's not in the IEP, OCR will not challenge the IEP team. They will challenge a failure to provide what's in the IEP. So they'll challenge supplementary aids that are not provided. And, I run into this all the time, especially with children middle school and high school. And you run into some renegade teachers that are just not providing accommodations. It's ridiculous. And you can file an OCR complaint on one accommodation in a child that has 50. You can say that one teacher didn't provide one and still file a civil rights complaint. But if it's not in the IEP, you cannot file a civil rights complaint on that.
Right. And that's why it is so important I know as an advocate, reviewing IEPs is something I spend a lot of time doing. And if you don't have specific language in there, if you don't have things in writing in the IEP, there's no way that you can hold the school accountable. So that's why that language in IEPs is like so critical. Anne Marie is here from South Carolina, and Anne Marie says, what if virtual learning is offered, but the child doesn't learn or is engaged via teletherapy e-learning? Is that considered FAPE? The
No.
child just doesn't learn during this COVID era.
No, there are children that absolutely will not benefit from virtual learning.
Right.
I have them. I mean, I've got families in Michigan, and these children absolutely cannot access any instruction virtually. And that is a denial of FAPE, and that is a civil rights complaint that can be filed. It's not just comp ed in the fall. And people are going to have to really put on their thinking caps, especially knowing that school is not going to resume the way that it ended on March 13th in most districts in America. And do children go to private clinics at the expense of school districts if they cannot receive meaningful instruction? One thing I want to point out is that for some children, having a paraprofessional or instructional assistant or instructional aide, whatever your district calls it, on a virtual meeting to keep your child more engaged can be very, very helpful. I'm finding that is especially helpful for children that have ADHD, some children that have an autism spectrum disorder, that can be very, very, very helpful.
Oh, I bet. And I know I was working with a family this spring, and one of the things that wasn't happening was any kind of really direct instruction. So the para was able to set up some one-on-one time through, a Zoom meeting, but that still was so much more beneficial to the child than having a group, Zoom call and, supposedly trying to do some kind of teaching over it. So I think what we need to look at is what are the online services that are being offered, and are they being individualized enough for your child to benefit from? And if they're not, is there a tweaking that we can do to help that? Or do we look at options? I know some families are saying that they're okay with a para coming to their house and doing one-on-one work, as long as they're within the safety guidelines and don't have a fever and those kinds of things. But so I think we just have to look at the different options that we can create and not be stuck on, is it going to be worksheets or is it going to be online? But what can we really do to individualize that for your child? And that's where parents and students, I think we want to get our students' voices in there, what our kids are telling us as far as what works and what doesn't work, and make sure that that gets shared with the school too.
Yeah, I think one thing that parents are going to have to think about more than most have, especially because of the pandemic and children. My son has an immune deficiency disorder, children that have severe asthma, children that have PANDAS and PANS, children that have different kinds of medical needs. They're going to have to look at putting these children on homebound, and that requires a district to have a homebound teacher, that as long as we know that teacher is healthy and wearing a mask, and a parent is comfortable having that person come into the house, that you could have services provided in the house. The problem with homebound is that it is determined by states. In Michigan, a district has to provide 2 1-hour non-consecutive sessions. I will tell you, because of some case law, that I've been able to get kids a lot more than that. I think parents are going to have to, with the help of advocates that are knowledgeable, push really hard to increase homebound services. And it can be done. It just has to be done, and you have to push really, really, really hard, because you're not just pushing it for a child who had surgery and is going to be out of school for a couple of weeks. These are children that are going to be out for extended periods of time and need a lot more instruction. You don't want to tell, I will tell you, I've had some parents say, well, I'm just going to homeschool. I don't support that. One, if you're a teacher, you're first and foremost your child's parent. So I don't even think in that case it makes sense. But the majority of parents are not teachers. And I believe that children have a right to a free, appropriate public education in America, whether they're general ed or special ed and need public school.
Right. And so maybe the topic of homebound instruction would be good to look at a little bit more as far as what most states require with a physician's note. So if you want to speak a little bit about maybe some of the paperwork parents would have to start getting ready if they're considering requesting homebound instruction.
So if you are going to request homebound, you have to have a letter from your child's treating medical doctor. It has to explain why a child cannot be in school. And if a child's on homebound, a child is not coming to school for anything, not for electives, not for extracurricular. That child is out of school. And the doctor has to explain why that is the case. I actually have a situation right now with a family that has 3 children, and one has to be on homebound for medical. And now with COVID, the doctor has written homebound orders for the other 2 children because it's not safe for them to be in school with other children and possibly bring things home to this child who has compromised immune issues. Um, the doctor has to put a start and stop date. I just did one of these with a parent today. In some cases, it makes sense for it to start the first day of school and end the last day of school. You can always shorten it. You can always have a doctor write a note and say that a child will be returning to school. It can be harder to get more and more letters. In some cases, if you know your child, I have a number of kids that have pandas and PANS and mitochondrial disease. And these children can be out of school, especially mitochondrial, for specific periods in the winter. And we know, and we plan that in advance with the school district. And we know when the doctor's letter is going to be submitted and how long the child will be on homebound and when the child comes off.
Right. So that would be really helpful. Um, Laura says that her child was on homebound prior to COVID. They did not want to provide direct homebound services during the pandemic, but rather distance learning.
Well, and if they, sure, because during the school closure, if teachers were not going into school buildings, they didn't have to go into homes either. If districts didn't feel that it was safe to have teachers in someone else's home during the closure, then that's a reality of dealing with these months of the pandemic. But as things open up, as governors are allowing extracurricular activities and allowing teachers in buildings and allowing day camps and overnight camps, I think it opens the door to have someone come into a person's home and provide a direct service.
Right, right. Yeah, and I just posted something today from Education Week that had a list of the state guidelines, the different states that have issued state guidelines for reopening schools. So that might be something that people want to look at. There are still some states that haven't issued that guidance. Like I know Idaho, where I live right now, is the governor's announcing our guidelines today. So people are kind of waiting to hear that news. But um, and then I think the other thing that's interesting sometimes is to look at what other states are doing, not just your state, because sometimes you can get some good ideas from other states. And it's like maybe this is something we want to look at for our district, for our school. I think most states give guidance. There's not, I don't know, of many states that say these are, you know, absolute that you have to do this. It seems like most states are leaving it up to districts. I don't know, Marcie, if that's been your experience too.
Yeah, it is state by state. Some governors are giving much stricter guidance.
Okay.
This is coming up in New York, where Governor Cuomo and Mayor De Blasio just constantly fight with each other, like they're Oscar and Felix. Some states are coming out with pretty clear guidance. Other districts are coming out with their own guidance. Frankly, I think it's ridiculous because nobody still knows what this is
Right.
going to really look like as we get into August and we get into early September. And I think it should be frightening to everybody. I think it should be terrifying to parents that haven't been able to work, who can go back to work but yet can't if they have to be home with their children, especially, again, parents that are not teachers and can't provide their children with access to any instruction. I have a rally scheduled for October 7th in Michigan on the steps of our Capitol. I am still hoping to have that. I never get thousands at my rallies. I get hundreds, so I think it's pretty easy to socially distance. So we'll see, but I'm still hoping to have that on October 7th because Michigan, like some states, is a big giant nightmare pre-COVID for special education.
That's like, yes. So we had another question here from Christy. She says, I had an IEP meeting on February 11th. My son finished his testing the day before the shutdown.
Oh my gosh.
This is clear now over 90 days, and we haven't had a follow-up meeting. Wasn't he protected under the IEP umbrella from February 11th? He should have had his services, and I should have had a meeting because they went over the 90-day law. So that must have been
if the child had the testing but didn't have the IEP yet, yeah, they're on the hook for a denial of a free appropriate public education, and I would be explaining a civil rights complaint to that family. I will tell you, I've had a couple situations where districts haven't finished testing, and this was before some of our clinics opened. And what I was able to do for a few kids in Michigan was have really, really robust 504 plans written that include hours in a resource room or whatever your district calls it, specialized instruction for so many hours a week, and social work services, speech, sometimes occupational therapy. And then we have meetings already scheduled for, later in September. But in that case where the district failed in its obligation, they could have held that meeting virtually. They could have done it through Zoom or Google Meets. That is a serious denial of a free appropriate public education and worth a significant amount of compensatory education.
Yeah, I would,
What state is that with 90 days?
Yeah, Christy, why don't you, I'm not sure what state Christy's from. In most states, they, have a 60-day time limit where they have to complete the evaluation, and then an additional 30 days to write the IEP, to have the IEP meeting. Again, it depends on your state. And so I would look, Christy, if you've emailed the district, this past spring and requested the IEP meeting, and what kind of response you got. But there were clear guidance from the Department of Ed during school closures that, these timelines were still in place. And like Marcie said, I mean, most of us, I know as an advocate, I had lots of IEP meetings this spring that were Zoom meetings. I even had mediation that we did over Zoom. So, there's no excuse for a district not following up. It sounds like this was your child's initial evaluation. So, yeah, that's really important. I think for sure that you would want to do something. And, it could be a variety of things, but the OCR complaint would be one way that you could try to resolve that. Let me see. We have some new comments that came in. Dan says, sorry if this was covered already. When do you steer families to an OCR complaint rather than some of the other dispute resolution options like the state complaint process and due process?
So state complaints are not what they were 15 years ago. I always say that my Michigan Department of Ed, they're the Grinch that stole Christmas. I mean, they just are so stingy when it comes to providing compensatory services, saying there was a denial of a free appropriate public education. And in my state, there's no way to challenge it. There's no appeal process. And my Michigan Department of Ed, and they hear me say it all the time, I think they're morally and ethically bankrupt. I try to be their worst walking nightmare. And I am when it comes to complaints, because that's why I have steered families and explained the benefits of filing a civil rights administrative complaint versus a special education state complaint. Due process complaint is different, because it is a complaint that, while it's submitted in writing, it is ultimately, if it isn't resolved, it is what we call a hearable complaint, where you are in an administrative hearing and in front of an administrative law judge, and it's not court, which some parents misunderstand, but you prepare for it like it is. I was in due process for my own child in 2006 and prevailed, and it was absolutely like preparing for a court trial. It was draining on every single level. It was very depressing. There are times that due process can make sense because of the resolution session that is required when a parent files. So if a parent files for due process, the school district is required to reach out and offer a resolution session. If a school district files due process, they are not required to offer that resolution session. That puts parents at a grave disadvantage. So if it's something that you think you have a good game of poker and you've got a strong case and you have a good chance of resolving it with your district in a resolution, or asking your district if they'll go to mediation for the due process, that certainly you wouldn't have a lot to lose doing that. That wouldn't stop you if you don't prevail or don't achieve your goal from filing a civil rights complaint. State complaints to me are the big loser right now. The only time I file state complaints are on goals that aren't measurable and present levels that don't have clear data, and I want to make a school district pretty miserable for not providing a child services. And our state department demands a lot during a complaint investigation. The outcomes are not wonderful, but what they do during the investigation is worth filing some state complaints and then filing with the Office of Civil Rights on separate allegations to drive comp ed.
Right. And I think that's the important point, is that, some parents think you can only file one at a time, but if the issues are different, you can separate them out and you can do, like you said, both the OCR and a state complaint. Laura says, can OCR go past the 180 days? Our time frame began in January 2020.
They ask if you're asking for an extension. I'm not saying they will never grant one. I have never seen them grant one, and I have been responsible for over 4,000 federal civil rights complaints on disability over the last 10 years. Actually, over 5,000 in just the last couple of years. So I have not seen them go over that.
Right. So pretty much, I think you would want to do that. Sometimes when
but she has a different, is this the one with the 90 days? Is this the one that?
No, Christy's the one with the 90 days.
That's a different situation.
Yeah. Okay. And Christy said that she's from North Carolina.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, and I think sometimes, when I help parents write OCR complaints, if it was something close to that, within the last 6 months, I'll still, include that for kind of some context.
Historical.
Yeah, background information, so they know that this actually started beforehand. And I don't know, Marcie, if you have a feel for what the time is going to be for some of these OCR complaints about not getting services during school closure. Like you said, sometimes they'll offer, a fast-tracked way to get it resolved. But is there a way to give parents an idea of how many months it might be before there's resolution?
There really isn't, and that is the negative of the Office for Civil Rights. They have always been underfunded and understaffed because Americans don't value civil rights, which is why I talk about civil rights till people either want to put me on mute or just totally turn me off. Civil rights have to matter, and the federal offices for civil rights, justice delayed is justice denied. And until these offices are taken seriously and they are staffed the way they need to be staffed to do investigations, and they are funded the way they need to be funded, it can take a long time. And there are 12 regional offices, and they all operate differently. I have experience with all 12 offices. I have seen complaint full investigations take anywhere from 4 months to 4 years. I've seen the rapid resolution is relatively new. They only started offering that in the last year and a half. And that can be a really, really, really good outcome because it can be the fastest track to getting a child services. Before they had rapid resolution, and even with rapid resolution, when they open the complaint for investigation, they will often say to you, are you interested in facilitated resolution between parties, which is the same thing. And if you say yes and the school district says yes, then they will schedule a mediation. In some cases, the school district will say, we want to reach resolution, and they will negotiate directly with the OCR. The OCR will ask the parent for input. I don't love that one as much, but if you stay in close contact with the OCR attorney, you can still achieve some good results.
Well, and that leads to a question I had. There was some discussion on another Facebook page today about, the evidence and the documentation that parents can send the OCR, when they're filing their complaint, and what is possible during the process. If parents find additional documentation, what can they do to see if the OCR complaint officer will take new evidence or document?
Now, the OCR will take new evidence as long as they're investigating.
Okay.
It's better to get it to them sooner rather than later. If I have really strong evidence, I have a parent scan and email that with the actual consent itself. I had a comical one just this week, a COVID issue, and the district had just had a school board meeting, and a school board member went on the record. It's on the website saying, we know we violated a whole lot of IEPs during school closure. I included that in the civil rights complaint. So, when you have really, really, really strong evidence, the earlier you get it to them, the better. They will always reach out to you. You have to watch for emails and phone calls, because if you don't respond to them within 14 days, they will close your complaint. They won't just sit around and wait for you. So you do have to watch, especially for emails, especially if they ask questions. And sometimes they will. And with my families, I tell parents, don't panic. Take a deep breath and forward it to me, and I will help you answer the questions. I tell people, don't be frightened by it, but if you get questions, you do have to answer them.
Well, and you have been giving us so many wonderful tips of, because you have the insight of filing these thousands of complaints. So I want to let people know, if they don't currently get my weekly emails, and you would like to receive one for these tips that Marcie's been giving us, let us know. Let me know in the comments, because I'm going to be writing out the tips that she's sharing with us, and that will be emailed out to folks. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Nancy has a good question. She said, when you say if they provided fewer services, does that mean from accommodations?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
If important accommodations are not provided. So I had just had one yesterday that I included, where a child in 30-minute Zoom meetings was not given the accommodations to break down instructions. Homework assignments weren't chunked. The material wasn't read to the child. Child didn't receive teacher copy of notes or completed study guides. Children don't have word processors with speech to text or text to speech or any kind of app that they need. Yes, you can file a civil rights complaint on just accommodations, including a 504 plan.
Well, and that's the thing. And I was surprised when I saw some of the work that was being sent home for students, and with zero regard for the accommodations that were in the IEP. And it's like, this is like, this would be an easy thing for teachers to do, is to chunk the information, to have more white space on the worksheet, whatever the accommodations are. So we need to make sure that they're accountable for those accommodations, and not just the service hours. I mean, that's what, is most important, but you look at the other areas too.
Including adult support, paraprofessionals,
Yes.
however your district refers to that, that is an accommodation. That is not provided even through a virtual setting is a violation.
Right. And Laura had a question I had put up here, but she said, is a recorded IEP Zoom meeting part of the educational record? How do we request a copy for the complaint?
I don't know what she means, a copy of the, is she talking about if I file a complaint?
Well,
If
no,
I,
I think she's talking about a copy of the Zoom meeting, like a lot of times they're recorded, and then you can get a link that is to the exact recording of the Zoom meeting. So,
I, that's an interesting one. I think that would be, different states have different privacy laws when it comes to giving a parent of a recorded Zoom meeting because you've got other children involved. So that one you would have to
well, I
check with
think
the
she
state.
means the IEP Zoom meeting. So if you have an IEP meeting by Zoom
If you have an
and they
IP Zoom
recorded
meeting,
it,
well, if it's audio recorded, you always have a right to it. Video, either way, you have to let them know. If you want to video record, you have to let them know. I had one case where they didn't intend a video. A teacher actually had it on truly by accident. And we saw it and she was mortified that it was on and she turned it off. Anything, if you're in an IEPT meeting and your district, they are recording, whether it's a video recording or an audio recording, you have a right to it.
Yeah, so I would just specifically, Laura, send a written request for a copy of the recording, because that is part of your child's educational record. And so for sure, you just want to make sure that that request is in writing. Um, let's see, we have a few more minutes here. Nancy says, thank you. Many parents were given paper packets, but not modified. Yeah. So for sure,
Violation.
yeah, that is something
That's a
that
clear violation.
easily been, done. And I think, that's the thing when I look at, because, I'm a retired teacher, so I also understand, the complexities, and I have no idea what it would have been like to try and, plan this online learning in just a couple weeks. So I think a lot of us realized that and gave teachers and schools grace this spring. As an advocate, I'm telling parents that we have to raise the bar. They know now what worked and what didn't work in the spring. They've had summertime to develop new strategies, techniques, get training on online learning or distance learning. And so we have to have higher expectations for the education that our kids will be getting this fall. And so
My hope is the civil rights complaints will raise that expectation, because you're exactly right. The fact that districts were not in any way prepared for this kind of crisis should be such a national wake-up call. A lot of private schools were absolutely prepared. I mean, they hit the ground running, but the public schools were not, they are not, they aren't even right now. And it has to be a wake-up call, but it all comes back to, what is America's commitment to the institution of public education? I'll say, and I don't think it's funny, but I can say it with humor. How do you say that a kid is matriculated from kindergarten to first grade this fall when a child lost 4 months of kindergarten? How do you say that a child who took Algebra 1 in 8th or 9th grade and lost 4 months is ready for Algebra 2? How do you say that a child in the 2nd grade is ready to move into the 3rd grade, where you are reading to learn instead of learning to read, when you lost 4 months of that school year? What does K-12 even mean anymore? And what will it mean come this fall? I don't support just magical thinking of, oh, we're just going to move these kids into the next grade and life is going to be wonderful. Children that lost their last year of school, that are in school to the age of 21 or the age of 26 in Michigan, those children have a right to more education. People have to decide that matters. People like Charmaine and I, we can think it, we can scream it, we can say it till we're blue, but we can't force people to care.
Right. Wow, and it's such important conversations, and it's such important issues that we need to look at. I mean, you think of teachers in the fall, they normally have to kind of backtrack and cover some of the skills that were taught in April or May and review that. But teachers are going to have a lot of content this fall that has to be taught initially, right? Because it wasn't taught during the springtime. So all of that just delays our kids' education, which just really makes it so much more important for us to make sure our voices are heard and that we follow up and do something about it.
I mean, I know all the answers are not easy. I know it's not easy to figure out what to do. What do you call a child that's lost 4 months of school? I get it. It's not easy. That's why you have state and federal legislatures, and those people are supposed to be smart, and they're supposed to be able to run your state and federal government. And you have to vote for the ones you think are going to be smart and committed. But
Right.
those questions have to be asked and answered. Saying, oh, this is just too hard, or we don't know, those are bad answers.
Right, right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to respect your time, Marcie. This again is Marcie's Facebook page that you can go to, Special Education Wall of Shame. And then, Marcie, give your website again.
So my website is my name. It's marcielipsitt.com, or on Facebook, it's Marcie Lipsitt Education Advocate.
Okay. And I'll add those to.
If you're in Michigan, I also have my Michigan Alliance for Special Education. So I have a Facebook page for Michigan.
Good. So I'll post those as additional links that you can use to get in touch with Marcie. Again, this will be conversation that will continue, right? I mean, it's just the beginning of July. We have no idea what it's going to look like a month from now. And so, please stay in touch. Next Thursday, I have an advocate from Connecticut, Diane Wilcuts, who did a recent survey from, I think it was over 3,000 parents replied to the survey about the services they received, didn't receive, things that they want to see change. So I hope you can return next Thursday at noon Mountain Time here. And we will be talking to Diane Wilcuts from Connecticut. And she has.
Can I end with one thing? Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
So Diane is in Connecticut, and Diane will tell anybody that during Hurricane Sandy, schools were closed for a while. U.S. Department of Ed did not grant any waivers, loosening the requirements in IDEA. Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, how those children are suffering. There's been no loosening of the IDEA. We have never, ever, for any kind of school closure, since we've had state and federal special education and civil rights laws and rules, have we loosened those during a closure. There's no reason to do it now.
Right. Exactly. And that's the guidance we've heard from the U.S. Department of Ed, right? That we should still be expecting the timelines to happen, that, IDEA is still the law of the land. And so those are the expectations that we can hold schools to. So until next Thursday, when we can continue our COVID conversation, I am Charmaine Tanner. Thank you so much, Marcie, for spending some time with us today. We so appreciate your work.
Thank you.
And we shall see you guys. Have a wonderful day, and we will be back next